something that we haven't talked about or shared publicly on the internet yet.
There's so many questions.
I should date her before anyone else does. And to be honest, I don't think I told her this. I just landed a gold mine with meeting Elie. So I was like, if I get her, that means that no one else can.
At what point in dating did you know that this was the person you wanted to marry, and what gave you that clarity?
I knew because she checked off all the boxes.
Next thing you know, you're walking down the aisle and there's a lot of big questions that haven't been asked.
I gotta make sure you don't have COVID or anything before I kiss you.
Both in friendships and in dating, being clear and honest with how you feel about somebody is the kindest thing you can do.
I don't have a lot of emotions compared to her. I'd be like, well, why are you crying? Or why are you sad?
That used to piss me off. Welcome back to the Couples Edition with Elie and Elie. This is obviously a unique and exciting episode. We have some guests with us here today.
Well, we have these ladies that are going to be hanging out and talking with us. We actually got together yesterday for a goodbye party of a friend of mine. And as we were talking about relationships, these ladies had so many questions. And so we invited them to our podcast. And so we will be talking about all things dating, relationships, marriage, and all the spicy things that anyone would want to know, especially these ladies. So we'll dive right into it.
Nothing is TMI, so ask away.
Absolutely.
The first question I have is, how did you guys know that you were making a decision to get married, fully aware of what you were getting into and not making a decision in the infatuation phase of dating?
That's a good question. I think for me, I like to interview whenever I am dating per se, because I do recognize that when you meet someone, if you're talking to them, you probably are already attracted to them. So you're already infatuated in some way. But what I try to do is try to ask real questions and real deep questions when I get to know someone. And so whenever we met, I remember we had our first Zoom call, and she'll tell you it felt like an interview because I didn't ask her any of the nice, sweet things. I asked her really hard questions, questions about what do you think about capital punishment?
Who did you vote for?
Yeah, all the questions, literally. I asked her questions about her dreams, what she wanted to be and become, what she believed in, just different, maybe I don't know, psychological or even mental, emotional questions, but really deep, raw questions. And I think she'll tell you our first two conversations were very interview-like, and they weren't very mushy-gushy and, oh, you're cute, I enjoyed talking to you. They weren't like that at all, and we didn't even feel that chemistry our first two conversations. And part of it was because I knew that if we created too much romantic chemistry, we'd have a hard time seeing through all the fluff of who you actually are. So I personally like the interview style of getting to know someone and just diving into it and seeing what they think or seeing what I can pick up from them.
I agree. I think also we had a unique situation during COVID where when we first met, Elie was living in Mexico. So our first FaceTime, he was in Mexico and I was in SF, and he was moving back. It was during COVID, he was traveling around for a bit. So for our first 3 weeks getting to know each other, it was on FaceTime. So there wasn't any physical energy. And then we also talked about our physical boundaries before we ever met in person. So we had very strong boundaries. And I think something that we haven't talked about or shared publicly on the internet yet is that we did not have sex before marriage. And I think a big reason for that is partially what we believe in, and also partially because we've read the science that when you merge your life with somebody in that way, these chemicals in your brain skyrocket, and it actually can influence how you feel about somebody artificially because it's all these hormones and chemicals of being infatuated and in love. And we didn't do that. And so it helped us stay a lot more sober minded, which I think is ultimately what allowed us to move at a quicker pace, because I think sometimes when you go that route, it can influence how you feel about somebody in a negative way where you might start to pass over some of their flaws. And we were not skipping any flaws. We were if we saw something, we asked about it, and we got to the nitty gritty in that way. And so we were just really intentional about we want to figure out how we feel about each other before mixing in anything that would complicate it in an unnecessary way. Yeah. And I think we both had... And I think from past experiences, we had just learned what we wanted to do better and do differently. And so I think that played into it as well.
Well, I was going to add that I I had a list, and so did you. So we had lists of like what we wanted out of a partner, and that was really helpful because when you meet people, it's really easy to look at your list and see, do they match or do they not? At least like a lot of the things that don't require conversation. And for example, like, you know, we met on Hinge kind of, but on Hinge, like you can see who someone is as far as like their profile based on like basic things like age, where they live, what they work, or just like different kind of things that you can set on Hinge that's easy to filter. And so for me, I had a list. And so as I was getting to know her, I was asking her questions that were like tailored to my list. So I knew where to kind of like write her off or where to kind of like keep and be interested further in. And so I think that helped a lot of just like getting through the fluff, but you know, in an easier way.
Speaking of lists, like we were actually just talking about this. Is there an expectation that someone will fill out 100% of your list?
The way that I would answer that is, for me personally, it was about finding the non-negotiables. So they're really nice to haves. Like height is a nice to have, or you know,
Like not too short, or
no, basically like
tall?
meaning like, yeah, if you have that preference, it's nice to have.
Well, a lot of girls want a guy that's tall. I have a friend who's like, I don't want anybody under 6 feet. And I'm like, honey, that's not a non-negotiable. Your dream man might be 5'8".
Yeah, and it could be, you know, like that's one. Another one could be like, I don't know, career preference or something, because maybe you are in a point in your life where you would like to marry someone in a specific career because it's compatible with your life. So it's like a nice to have. But I think for us, or for me, it was like there are some character things that are non-negotiables. And so I would want those character things to be available at the 100% measurement, right? It's like I want someone that is fun to be around, that is easygoing, that is adventurous. There are some of those characteristic things that I really wanted. My wife, I think she is like, I think she's kind of funny, but did I want someone that was like, you know, comedically funny? Like, no, not necessarily. That would have been nice, but there are certain things about someone. It's nice to have. My wife is funny. I promise, guys. I promise. But those are those like types of things that I think you kind of have to be okay with not having, because otherwise you're trying to find the most perfect person in the world, and that's kind of a hard standard to meet for anyone.
Yeah, I think it's really important to separate what is a nice to have, like Elie saying, versus like I absolutely would not marry somebody that didn't feel this way and that didn't like think this, believe this, and act like this and live this out. They were very strict non-negotiables, and I think that's what made it easier. Like once we kind of checked the boxes, like, okay, they at least say this, but do they live it out? And so I think making sure too that like even if you check a box, like, okay, they believe this, do they live it though?
Yeah.
Because I think it's easy to meet people who are like, I believe this, but then there's no evidence of that in their life. And so that was something I think we were very intentional. Like when we did meet in person and we did start dating, we were like, had our, I don't know, detective goggles on to be like, are they actually this person? Is this who they say they are?
Yeah. I think I had 4 things for Allie that I would say are non-negotiables. The first one is faith. That's an easy one. The second one was smart. I wanted someone that was like really smart, because I enjoy intellectual conversations and I enjoy going really deep. I also wanted someone that was adventurous, because I moved to California from Texas, but I always had this idea of like living internationally and going somewhere outside of like my home state. So you'd have to kind of have someone that is adventurous to do that. So that to me was a non-negotiable. I think it's a really big thing in life. And so for me, those were like non-negotiables. And I think I asked her a lot about who she was, or found out that she met those things, and that helped me, that gave me at ease.
I know that when y'all were mentioning the interview phase, and I think Elie said that the first few weeks you guys didn't have chemistry necessarily, or just trying to get to know each other, those non-negotiables. During that process, were you nervous about not developing chemistry, and then how long did it take y'all to develop chemistry?
I think it was only the first 2 calls. If he said weeks, that's not true. His memory sometimes. I think it was the first 2 calls. We were a little bit more nervous because obviously it's a little awkward, like on a FaceTime, talking to a complete stranger. I think we were just, Elie will say particularly for me, that I was like sitting a little uptight. My arms were crossed. So,
She's very uptight.
So I think it was harder to like let loose and get comfortable. And then I think on the second or third call, we were able to like let loose a little bit more. We started joking. And so I don't think it's necessarily that there wasn't I guess, yeah, when I got off the first call, I was like, there's no chemistry with this guy, but he looks like a perfect match on paper. So there was enough aligned for me to be like, let me give him a chance and flesh it out what's there.
Yeah, I totally agree. The first call wasn't very like chemistry focused, and I actually liked that because it allowed me to step back and realize this person is awesome on paper. It's great, but now we have to we should try to have some fun. We should do something, we should meet. And she mentioned I was in Mexico and I moved back to the States. And for me, part of that was, hey, let's find out if we have all this chemistry in person, if we can actually develop, if we can have fun, if we can have good conversations. And that was, to me, a lot easier way to get to know someone, was understanding that they are a great candidate on paper, but then hanging out in person and feeling, oh, you know what, they're also really great in person, and all these other attributes really come to life.
I have so many questions, but at what point in dating did you know that this was the person you wanted to marry, and what gave you that clarity? And once you had that clarity, were you nervous about communicating that, especially it was so early on in the relationship? I can't imagine 1 month into the relationship, okay, maybe we should get engaged in another 2 months.
Right.
But
that's a really good question. My answer is dating is really hard. And the best way to make hard things easy is to communicate and to be honest and transparent. We're adults, right? So imagine we're adults, but we're playing these mind games with who do you like? Do you like me? How does she feel? How does he feel? So for me, I thought the best way to make this easier for her was to communicate my feelings the most transparent way that I can. So I think whenever I got to a point where I liked you, I think I told you I like you. I said those words. I made it pretty clear. But then after we went on our first date, the next day I came to her house, brought her flowers, and I brought her a card. And I asked her, hey, is there anything else about me that you want to know before we think about dating? Right? So I'm making it pretty clear that hey, I'm pretty interested. So I would probably add that I think just trying to communicate openly about how you feel about someone makes it far easier. I also think that people should kind of demand that as well too. It's try to get clarity with conversation so you're not playing mind games. To answer your first question, I knew because she checked off all the boxes in person or on paper, and then she also checked off all the character boxes as well too. And I saw it come to life in a way where I was this isn't a fluke. This isn't a one-off. I saw it come to life and I was wow, this is incredible. And I wanted it so bad that I was I should date her before anyone else does. And to be honest, I don't think I told her this, but actually I haven't told her this. But at some point, whenever we were kind of dating, I was oh my goodness, this is awesome. I just landed a gold mine with meeting Elie, because it was COVID, so people weren't all that social and people weren't going anywhere. So I was if I get her, that means that no one else can. Because the chances of her meeting someone else at at a coffee shop are low because coffee shops are closed. So part of me was recognizing that there's a gem here, and if I don't jump into it, then I'm kind of gonna miss it out or drag it on, and then next thing you know it, she's kind of confused and she walks away.
That's really sweet, honey. He told that story a little bit out of order, but close enough.
Sure.
It was on the day we met in person, our first date. He asked me if there was anything else I needed to know about him before dating. And I remember thinking oh my gosh, we just met in person. Is he about to ask me to be his girlfriend? Which he did the next day. And then he brought flowers and a card the next day.
Yeah.
And in his card, he said, I want to be very clear with my intentions for you. I'm dating you to find out if I want to make you my wife. So literally...
Yeah.
2 days into meeting. And even when he asked me to be his girlfriend, he literally told me, I don't want there to be any gray space. I want to make my intentions very clear, which was something that I had been praying for because I had dated a handful of people who just you wonder, do they like you? Why aren't they texting me back? Or what does this mean? And I just remember thinking I don't want to be with anybody that is afraid to put me on their story, because I dated somebody once who never posted me on social. And I thought that was creepy. And I was just what is there to hide? To see if other girls on the side, or why are they being so mysterious? And to me, I actually would see that as a huge red flag now. And I was reading a book that said clear is kind. And I think both in friendships and in dating, being clear and honest with how you feel about somebody is the kindest thing you can do.
Yeah.
And just being the most intentional. And it doesn't waste time because there is no question of where we're feeling. And because he was so intentional, it gave me the the peace, I think, to be honest about how I was feeling too. I didn't have to hide it and be like, oh, well, you might, you're not that cool.
Yeah.
But because he was really intentional, I was like, yeah, I like you too.
And it was really great being forward, because then I could get an idea of if she's into it as well, right? If I say, hey, I'm into you and I'd like to date you, or so on and so forth, being a little bit like upfront about it, it's easy to get a reaction from her and understand if she's into it or she's not. Therefore, it saves me a lot of time as well too, right? Because then I know if I should continue pursuing this or if she's not into me. So I just think, clarity is kindness, and it's easier.
Speaking of that, he did ask before he could kiss me for the first time. So speaking of like intentionality and being clear, I think it was the day you asked me out.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be official before he kissed me, which nobody had ever done that before. So at first I was like, this is a little weird, but I responded and I was like, sure, okay.
Of course. Plus it's like COVID, y'all. So like people aren't physically touching each other, You got to make sure you don't have COVID or anything before I kiss you.
I know you guys shared a little bit about where you were coming from when you started dating, but I'm curious what your mindset was before it all started, like your experiences before you guys met, and just how you were approaching dating in general. Like, were you jaded? Were you just really wanting to find someone? Like, where were you at?
I was definitely ready for a relationship. Like when we had met, I had came off of another relationship like maybe a year prior. And that relationship I think went on for like 2 years or so. I think once I gave myself like 10 months of kind of a break, 10, 12 month-ish of a break, I think I got to a point where I realized, all right, I'm like mature enough for relationships. I'm like ready for a relationship. And I also wanted a partner. I wanted to like meet someone, but I didn't want to like mess around and like meet multiple people and like feel around, because I kind of like knew what I wanted. So I figured I don't want to waste my time meeting a bunch of people and figuring out who a bunch of people are when I can like find my person. So I was actually really excited because I think I had gotten to a point of maturity where I was like, okay, I know what I want. And I got an idea of like what that feels like, what that looks like, and I get it. So for me, it was like, I want to find that and find it, as soon as I can. So I was personally excited about finding someone, and I was prepared, I feel like.
I believe he also told me that he was on the prowl. He was like on Hinge looking for his wife. Like he was scrolling, doing coffee dates, all the things.
I was.
And I was doing the exact opposite. I was in no means on the prowl. I never felt peace about joining a dating app, not because I don't believe in them. I just never felt like the urge or that it was right for me. I was really just running my race in the direction that I felt called to, with the belief that at the right time, the right person would cross paths. I didn't feel like I had to strive or go out of my way looking. I just felt complete peace that if I was living the life I felt called to, that naturally the right person would intervene. And I was literally sitting on my couch. So even though I think people are really well intended when they're like, you need to put yourself out there, you need to be going on dates and going out of the house, I do believe that it's true that, yeah, you need to be putting yourself out there in the sense that you need to be living your life on purpose, do the things you want to do, go to the places you want to go to. I used to have a mindset of like, oh, well, I don't want to travel because I want to go to that city with my person one day. And then I realized like, that's so silly. I can go do that now and then do it again. Like you don't need to live on pause until you meet your person.
Yeah.
Live your best life. And I really believe that you'll find your person while living on purpose. And that's not to say there weren't many nights where I was like, when will I meet my person?
Yeah.
All my friends are getting married or whatever. So I'm not to say like that's an easy journey, because I know struggling with singleness can be really difficult. And I've definitely had those moments, but I definitely had, when we met, I was at a place where I'm like, I'm just living my life. Yeah. I have a good life. I know what I want. I know where I'm going. And when it's the right time, it's the right time. Because I think timing is so important. And I look back to in my earlier 20s where I was like, oh, I'd love to like find my husband now. I'm so glad I didn't, because I had so many incredible experiences single. Like we talked a little bit before we started recording, like I got to move to China and I got to do all these crazy things by myself. And it literally changed my life and who I was as a person. And so had we met sooner, I think I would have missed out on some of those life experiences that really shaped me.
Yeah.
And so I'm a really big believer in that timing is everything.
I was wondering, you felt like so sure, right? But was there any hesitations at all from either side?
No, transparently, there wasn't any hesitation, because I got through the fluff really quickly. So before I met her, she was right. I was like going on dates and meeting people, but I wasn't like messing around going on dates and meeting people. I was like meeting people to identify if they were my person. And so I was quickly like writing people off respectfully, and I'd meet someone, I'd meet someone
With kindness.
with kindness, you know, I'd meet someone and I'd ask them, hey, like, how many kids do you want to have? And they'd say, oh, I don't want to have kids. And after some time, you know, the conversation would end, and then I would text them and say, hey, I don't think this is going to work out. I really want to have kids, but best of luck to you. So I think I had done so much, you know, I had done so much filtering that whenever I met her, I just knew. It's almost like you're looking for that right outfit or that right shirt, and like you keep buying a bunch on Amazon, you send them back, at least she does this. And then like you get the one that you want, and you're like, I get it. Like this is the one, like this matches, it fits, it's perfect, like this is it. So I think it was that for me. It was like going through so many conversations and recognizing that like I'm not finding the right thing. And then when you do find it, I think you just know. And people oftentimes say when you know, you know. I think that is true if you, I think, put yourself through the work a little bit, because then you'll know. I think there are some people that don't do enough work, and then they kind of like always think they know, or they're kind of like hazy and like gray about it. But I think you, like Allison said, if you put yourself out there, I think you'll start to identify patterns and you'll recognize what's for you. And I had no hesitation, to be honest.
And I think on top of that, knowing what you want. I've met a lot of people who are serial dating, looking to find somebody, but when I ask them questions about what do you want in life, they don't know. And I'm like, how can you find a life partner if you don't know at a high level? You don't need a detailed roadmap or plan, but you have some high level direction that you want to go, or some things that are really important to you, like having kids. I met somebody recently that told me they got divorced because they had never asked before they got married whether or not they wanted kids. And that might be shocking, but you could replace that with a variety of questions that people don't talk about. They fall in love, the hormones and chemicals are flying, and next thing you know, you're walking down the aisle and there's a lot of big questions that haven't been asked, which is one of the reasons we wanted to start this podcast, because we think what we did is a little bit rare in that we asked so many questions. So at this point, I can't say anything is a surprise. If anything, it's a surprise how we keep growing.
Yeah.
So who we are today, 3.5 years into marriage, we've changed a lot since day one. And I think that's why it's so important to know who people are, who their character is, and what they want in life. Because the day-to-day things, we've changed a lot. Our habits have changed, our mindsets have changed. And so if we didn't get to know who each other was from a character perspective,
Yeah.
I think that change then becomes hard, and people are like, oh, well, we grew out of love. And I think it's maybe more so, well, we grew in a certain way and our character flaws showed differently. And so I think for me, it's like being really intentional about what you want and then aligning with somebody who their core aligns, not just what they look like day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of growth, and I know that faith is really important to both of you. What did faith and spirituality look like before you got married, and how has it grown since you've been married now for a few years?
Amazing question. I think whenever we were first dating, we went to different churches. And I think, well, we started dating pretty quickly. So once we started dating and we realized that things were going to get pretty serious, then we started to identify, like, how do we pick a church for, like, ourselves, for each other? And so she ended up coming to my church. That's like one element of faith. But I think a big piece of what we tried doing whenever we like started getting really serious, which is pretty quickly, is trying to figure out how to like pray more together about our relationship and about where we were going. And we also even invited like some guidance into our relationship. So we invited some mentors of hers that are happy marriage or happy couple, amazing marriage. They're like pastors, they're couple advisors, they're just like amazing people. And I think part of that like faith journey was inviting them into our relationship so they can like guide us and teach us and like ask us questions and challenge us. And I think that was an amazing decision, because you have people that are able to ask you questions that you can't think yourself. So then her and I will sit at dinner talking about these things because we just haven't had a chance to think about them. And when we do that, we're then growing, I think, in our faith, because we're realizing, oh, wow, like that is really important. We should do that, or we should do this. So I think that's a big growth step. But what do you think, honey?
Yeah, I think also something we aligned on early was that we share the same core beliefs in faith, spiritually, whatever. And so then it was a matter of like, our smaller differences. Like, I think something we fought about early on was we have different church preferences. And today, even still, like, that's still kind of something we talk about.
Yeah.
Like, we just grew up in different environments going to church. And so even though we believe the same things, sometimes like our preferences differ. And so we've had to talk about like, what are your non-negotiables with church? And for Elie, he's much chiller. Like, I just care that we believe in the same things with the church we're going to. And I'm like, well, I really like when they do this a certain way. I really prefer that. It's just a preference. But I would say like early on, I think we aligned on like, what are our core value beliefs, similar to like our non-negotiables. For us, that was really important to share the same beliefs as well, because obviously like for us, it impacts our day to day and how we live.
Yeah.
And so we wanted somebody that aligned on that. And I wouldn't say that has changed over time. If anything, we're learning more and more as we go, like how to grow together spiritually.
Yeah.
And I will say like the transition from a single girl to a married one, my time with God has changed a lot, because like our lifestyle and like our time at home has changed. And so that's something that I've kind of had to learn and adapt and figure out how that looks differently. And I've talked to friends who like now have kids, and they're like, that makes it way harder and way different. So it's kind of figuring out how we grow together in that way. And I think we're still learning and unfolding.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say like anything major has changed, which I think would be a red flag.
Probably. Yeah, I totally agree. And we're still growing, still figuring out, you know, a lot, even in our faith, as far as like how to continue to do it together. The other night, Elie was telling me, like, I wish and hope that we pray more. We should pray more together. And like, that's just a real indicator that like life happens. We're a couple, and we might miss some of those like real steps of like your faith, and we should do those things more. But it's awesome to have a partner that would say that, right? Imagine you're dating someone that doesn't feel the same way, and you end up going through like 3, 4, 5 years of marriage, and you're like, we haven't gone to church in 5 years. Because the other person doesn't care so much about it. So I think it's amazing to have that, because now like that's extra growth that we're having together, is someone reminding and keeping us accountable when the other, you know, might forget.
Yeah, and I think something important to note is, for me personally, finding somebody who is spiritually in a similar place to me was really important, because I grew up in a household where my parents were different in that regard, and I hated watching one kind of drag the other. And I was like, I never want that. That is a hard non-negotiable for me, that like I don't just want to marry somebody that believes in God. I want to marry somebody who God is a part of their everyday life, and the decisions they make are all aligned with their beliefs. And I think that's something that's really cool, because we've made some big faith jumps in the 3 years we've been married. And every time there's no hesitation from the other person. It's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm on board.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like if we weren't aligned spiritually, doing things like that would be harder, because one person would be looking at it more logically and being like, that doesn't make sense.
And I mean, I'll kind of like go into a different topic, which is like kind of like being equally yoked in a way. I think sometimes you'll meet people that are dating someone and they're just like on different spiritual levels, which like I get that God can do the changing, but I think sometimes the individual is trying to change the other partner and hoping that they change, or hoping that they, you know, do something different or get deeper or whatever it is. And I think that's something to be careful of whenever you are dating and meeting someone, is be careful with finding someone that is in your like level per se. Otherwise, you'll be the individual trying to pull someone up, and it's a lot easier to pull someone down when you're trying to get pulled up. And so I think it's something just to be, you know, something to think about.
I feel like this might be a controversial word, but you know, we're just gonna go with it. Because the timeline for y'all was so like fast paced, what did submission look like, or growing in submission, especially from singleness to dating to engagement to marriage, and in that like still respecting one another, honoring one another in the submission process?
Whenever I mentioned earlier that I wanted someone that was smart, I think I tell her this all the time. I think what was really important to me was someone that was like book smart and street smart. And I think by street smart, I also mean like spiritually smart as well too, just like internal smart. And I think it's like the whole concept around like submission, in a way, I think could be viewed in a variety of ways. But the way that I kind of view that is, let's submit to each other, right? So I come with like some natural like pride, or some natural, I don't know, male aggression, whatever you want to call it, right? You know, I have testosterone, you know? And so, and obviously, like, you know, there are certain things that she as a woman needs to feel like she is heard and thought of, and so on and so forth. And so I think like the way that submission works is, I have to submit to reduce my testosterone levels a bit to be able to be sweet and kind and listen and be like, be a bear for her to hug. And, and I, and I think in some ways, like by doing that, I think she naturally kind of like, it's like a natural mesh where we just like get each other whenever we do that. It's not always perfect per se, but I think submission is like a two-way street in many ways. So that's like, I think the street smart, emotional smart, spiritual smart. But when it comes to like book smart, this is really valuable, really important. For me, I am the believer of like putting the right person in the right seat. Like this is pretty opposite of what many people do, but like my wife manages the finances in the house. She like does all the finances. And for me, that makes a lot of sense because she majored in finance. She worked in finance. So like she's the right person to be managing the books. I have an MBA as well too, and I did business stuff as well, but I don't spend all of my time working with numbers and finances and things like that. So for me, it makes a lot of sense to kind of like submit when my wife says, hey, we are spending a little too much on Amazon or eating out. For me, it's like, this is the finance whiz. It makes a lot of sense to listen to her and to agree with whatever analysis that she did on whatever. Or she's very punctual and really great at like analyzing how to get from place to place, and she's very like type A in that way. So I listen and agree whenever she has a suggestion on, hey, this is how long it'll take you to get to this party or this event, and this is how we should commute around. And then there are other areas where there are my strong suits that she recognizes, and she'll submit to those as well too. So I think it's like this sharing and balance of understanding like where your strengths are, because when you combine them, you're both stronger versus having, I think, these traditional roles that you all need to fit into. Because when you do that, then you're forcing someone to play a role that they might not be good at. And then the team is hurt, I think.
Yeah, I will say something that's unique about us that I don't know how common this is in relationships. I think we're both alpha in a sense that we're both very opinionated and we both have strong feelings. And growing up, my parents always told me, like, you need to marry somebody that is going to put you in your place, essentially, that's going to not let you walk all over them because I have a strong personality. And Elie, our first year of marriage, he definitely really showed that in a way. By calling things out in me, because there's a saying that marriage is like a mirror, that your spouse holds up a mirror to you. And Elie did that a lot. Like, hey, you're a little judgmental when you talk like this. Or like even when we were having conversations about church and me being opinionated on my preferences, Elie would call them out. And so I think in some of those ways, it was like, we have to find a balance of honoring each other because we're both so opinionated. And even doing business together, when we tried to do business together, we both were butting heads so much that we had to agree, like in regards to finances, like who's better at this, let's let them do it. So for us, I think the best way that we've submitted to each other is by serving the other person. In year one of marriage, I was joking earlier that we were having roommate fights, and I used to get mad that Elie would put his shoes next to the shoe rack instead of away in the shoe rack. And it was really bothering me, and I would like nitpick him about it. Instead, one day I just started putting his shoes away. And that sounds so minute and simple, but little things like that over time, like maybe I left my dishes out, Elie will wash my dishes. He won't complain about it. We've just found small ways to serve each other. That's just like small practical examples, but I think that's also true when it comes to like us living out our purposes. Like I like to serve Elie by knowing like if he needs to stay up all night and work on something and do an overnighter, which he did twice this past week, instead of me complaining like, oh, I wish you would go to bed with me and like sleep together, or I don't like that you're having the lights on all night. Instead, I'm like, no, he's walking in what he feels called to do. He's not just playing video games all night and doing this on a whim. Let me serve his calling and not like nag him about doing a lifestyle that I disagree with. Like, I don't think you should stay up all night. That's not healthy. Instead of me nagging him, I try to serve him in that and be like, how can I actually support him? Like, honey, you need to leave the lights on. I'll sleep with an eye mask. Like, how can I support what you're trying to do? And I will say that I think that more than anything has helped us, quote unquote, to submit to each other, because we're honoring and respecting not only who the other person is and what they're called to, but even little things around the house. Like, if Elie never puts his shoes away, is that big of a deal? Is that really the thing that I want to put my stake in the ground on and fight about? Or do I want us to fight about bigger things like, hey, we're not praying enough together. I'm going to put my stake in the ground on that one. And I think by doing that both ways, we're learning to serve each other, and that leads to submission by serving.
Yeah. And I'll add one more thing. Like, as a guy, I think I have like I don't have a lot of emotions compared to her, right? So whenever we fight earlier in our marriage, I'd be like, well, why are you crying? Like, or why are you sad?
That used to piss me off.
Yeah. I used
He's
to
like,
always,
he's like, well, I'm not going to talk to you if you're going to be crying.
yeah, if you're crying,
Which
then we
would
can't
make
talk.
me cry more.
Yeah, you know. But then I had to learn I need to submit to my my need to like be very direct and analytical and emotionless. I need to submit to that so that we can have a conversation and ask her, hey, why are you sad? Like, what did I say that hurt you? Can I fix it? Can I undo it? So I had to like submit in that way so that we can grow together. Because if I was just like, well, if you're upset and you're crying, then we're just not going to talk because I don't talk with crybabies. That's not going to help. You know?
It was something like that. It was close.
It's pretty close.
We've come a long way since then.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, guys. We hope this was interesting. If there's any juicy, spicy questions that weren't asked that you guys wish would have been asked, make sure you drop those in the comments or DM us, and we'll make sure to answer them on a future episode.
Goodbye.
Bye. We're out.